Dark clouds covered the sky as rain poured heavily over the city. The streets were almost empty, except for one woman standing in front of a towering glass building. Lena tightened her grip on the crumpled letter in her hand, her fingers trembling. Her sister's voice echoed in her mind, the words cutting through her like a blade. "He ruined me, Lena. He took everything. Don't trust him." Tears mixed with the raindrops on Lena's face, but her eyes burned with something stronger than pain. Revenge. She lifted her gaze to the top floor, where the light still shone through the large windows. Somewhere up there, Adrian Black sat in his luxurious office, completely unaware that his past sins had come back to haunt him. She took a deep breath, pushing back the memories that threatened to break her. There was no room for weakness. She had a plan, and nothing would stop her. Pulling out a small mirror from her bag, she checked her reflection. Gone was the heartbroken sister. In her place stood a determined woman, one who would do whatever it took to bring him down. The next morning, Lena walked into the grand lobby of Black Enterprises, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Everything about the place screamed power and wealth, but none of it impressed her. Money couldn't buy a conscience, and Adrian Black had none. She had spent weeks preparing for this. A fake resume, a fabricated background. Everything was flawless. It had to be. Adrian Black was known to be sharp, ruthless, and impossible to deceive. But Lena had one advantage. He had no idea who she was. When her name was called, she stepped into his office, her heart pounding. The room was massive, lined with bookshelves, expensive art, and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. And there he was. Adrian Black sat behind a sleek black desk, reviewing documents with an air of complete authority. He didn't even look up as she entered. "You're late," he said, his deep voice smooth but cold. Lena clenched her fists at her sides. Of course he would be arrogant. She forced a small smile. "My apologies, Mr. Black. The traffic was heavy." He finally looked at her, his sharp blue eyes scanning her face. For a brief moment, something flickered in his expression. Curiosity? Recognition? But it was gone just as quickly. "Lena Carter, correct?" he said, leaning back in his chair. "Your credentials are impressive. Tell me, why do you want to work for me?" Lena had prepared for this. She had practiced her answer 100 times. But sitting there under his piercing gaze, she felt an unexpected unease. She pushed it aside. "With all due respect, Mr. Black," she said smoothly, "who wouldn't want to work for you?" A slow smirk formed on his lips, as if he had caught onto something. "Flattery won't get you far in this company," he said, "but I do appreciate confidence." He studied her for another moment before nodding. "You're hired. Welcome to Black Enterprises." Lena exhaled silently. Step 1 of her plan was complete. Now she just had to get close enough to destroy him. Lena spent her first day at Black Enterprises studying everything around her. Every conversation, every detail, every piece of information. Nothing went unnoticed. She moved carefully, making sure not to attract too much attention, but also not to seem invisible. The employees were respectful, but cautious. No one dared to cross Adrian Black. His presence alone was enough to make people nervous. She sat at her desk outside his office, pretending to go through files while stealing glances at him. He worked in silence, his sharp eyes scanning documents, his fingers tapping lightly against the desk in thought. He was intimidating, but Lena wasn't fooled. Beneath the expensive suit and the perfect composure was a man who had ruined lives, and she was here to make sure he paid for it. Hours passed, and the office emptied as employees left for the day. But Adrian remained, completely focused on his work. Lena stayed too, waiting for the right moment. The opportunity came when he finally rose from his chair, stretching slightly before grabbing his coat. He glanced at her. "You're still here?" Lena quickly smiled. "Just finishing up some work, Mr. Black." His lips curled slightly, almost as if he found that amusing. "Dedicated on your first day? I like that." She nodded, keeping her expression neutral. "I believe hard work is the key to success." Adrian stepped closer, studying her again. "Tell me, Miss Carter, have we met before?" Lena's heart skipped a beat. Had he recognized her? No, it wasn't possible. She had changed her appearance just enough. Dyed her hair a different shade, worn a more sophisticated style. She forced a casual laugh. "I don't believe so, sir," she said smoothly. "But I suppose you meet a lot of people." Adrian didn't look convinced. His gaze lingered on her for a moment longer before he finally nodded. "I suppose?" He glanced at his watch. "Go home, Miss Carter. I don't expect my employees to work themselves to exhaustion on the first day." Lena smiled politely. "Good night, Mr. Black." He walked away, and as soon as he was out of sight, Lena exhaled sharply. He was sharp. Too sharp. She needed to be more careful. One wrong move, and everything would be over before it even began. Once she was sure he was gone, she turned to her computer, quickly inserting a USB drive. If she wanted answers, proof of what he had done to her sister, this was the way to get them. She clicked through files, scanning financial records, emails, anything that could expose him. Her pulse quickened when she saw a restricted folder labeled Confidential. Anna Carter. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was it, the truth she had been looking for. But before she could open it, a deep voice cut through the silence. "Looking for something, Miss Carter?" Lena froze. Her breath hitched as she turned around slowly. Adrian Black stood in the doorway, watching her with cold amusement. His jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled up, and his expression unreadable. The office was dark except for the glow of the computer screen, casting shadows across his face. He took a slow step forward. "Or, should I say, Miss Lena Carter?" Her blood ran cold. He knew. Lena's breath caught in her throat. The way Adrian stood, calm yet powerful, sent a chill through her. He had called her by her real name. He knew. Her mind raced for an excuse, an escape, anything. But there was no way out. The computer screen still glowed behind her, the confidential file just one click away. She had been seconds away from the truth, but now she was caught. Slowly, she straightened her posture, forcing her face into an expression of indifference. "I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Black." Adrian let out a low chuckle, but there was no humour in it. "Oh, you don't?" He took another step forward, his eyes never leaving her. "That's strange, because Lena Carter isn't the name on the resume you submitted." Lena clenched her fists, keeping her face blank. "That doesn't prove anything." Adrian tilted his head slightly as if considering her. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small file. He tossed it onto the desk beside her. "You should know by now that I don't hire people without running a background check." Lena's stomach twisted as she looked down at the folder. Her fake identity, completely exposed. He had known all along. She swallowed hard, meeting his gaze again. "If you knew, why did you hire me?" Adrian leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. "Because I wanted to see how far you were willing to go." His voice was calm, but there was something dark in his eyes, something unreadable. "So, tell me, Lena, what exactly were you looking for on my computer?" Lena's heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay composed. "I don't owe you an explanation." His smirk faded. "No, but I think you owe me the truth." His voice lowered, smooth yet commanding. "This isn't about the job, is it? It's about Anna." Lena's breath hitched, Adrian's gaze sharpened. So, it's true. He exhaled slowly, shaking his head. You really think I ruined your sister? Lena snapped, her anger breaking through. I know. She lost everything because of you. Adrian's eyes darkened. Is that what she told you? Lena stiffened. She had no reason to lie. He studied her for a long moment, then sighed. You've spent all this time plotting against me, but you never once considered that you might not know the whole story. Lena clenched her jaw. I don't need to hear your lies. Adrian's expression didn't change, but there was something unsettling about the way he looked at her, as if he knew something she didn't, as if he was waiting for her to figure it out. Finally, he pushed off the desk and stepped back. You're free to leave, Lena, but if you really want the truth, come to my office tomorrow at midnight. Lena frowned. Why would I trust you? He gave her a small, knowing smirk. Because you wouldn't have come this far if you didn't need answers. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Lena standing there, angry, confused, and more desperate than ever to uncover the truth. Lena barely slept that night. Her mind was a storm of thoughts, replaying Adrian's words over and over. You might not know the whole story. What had he meant? Was it just a trick to manipulate her, to throw her off balance? Or was there something she had overlooked? By the time the clock struck midnight, she found herself standing outside Adrian's office, her pulse racing. The building was eerily quiet at this hour, the usual hum of employees replaced by an unsettling stillness. She had considered not coming. She had even told herself to walk away, but something inside her refused to leave without hearing what he had to say. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open. Adrian was waiting for her. He sat in his chair, one hand resting on the armrest, the other swirling a glass of whiskey. He didn't look surprised to see her. If anything, he looked as if he had expected her all along. Right on time, he murmured, his voice smooth as ever. I admire your determination, Lena. She crossed her arms, refusing to let his calm demeanour shake her. Enough games. If you have something to say, say it. Adrian exhaled, setting the glass down. Fine. He leaned forward, his gaze locking onto hers. Tell me, what exactly do you think I did to your sister? Lena's fingers curled into fists. She lost her job, her reputation, everything, and it was because of you. Adrian watched her for a moment, then pulled open a drawer and slid a file across the desk. Read it. Lena hesitated, her stomach twisting. She didn't want to play into whatever game he was trying to control, but her curiosity, her need for the truth, won. Slowly, she picked up the file and opened it. Her breath caught in her throat. Inside were emails, financial records, and a signed contract. Her sister's name was there, but so was someone else's. Marcus Kane. Lena's blood ran cold as she read the documents. Anna hadn't been fired because of Adrian. She had been framed by Adrian's biggest business rival. She shook her head, refusing to believe it. This isn't possible. Adrian leaned back in his chair, watching her reaction carefully. I tried to protect her. I found out what Kane was planning too late. By the time I could intervene, Anna had already been blacklisted. Lena's hands trembled as she flipped through the papers, each one confirming what he was saying. Her sister had always believed Adrian had set her up, but the truth had been buried beneath lies and deception. Adrian's voice softened. I never wanted to hurt her, Lena. Lena swallowed hard, the weight of reality crashing over her. Everything she had believed, her entire reason for coming here, had been based on a lie. She lifted her eyes to Adrian, her voice barely above a whisper. Why didn't you tell her? Adrian's jaw tightened, and for the first time, she saw something unexpected in his expression. Regret, because by the time I tried, she had already decided I was the enemy. Lena's heart pounded. If this was true, then she had spent all this time hating the wrong man. And worse, she had walked straight into the real villain's trap without even realizing it. She stared at Adrian, her mind spinning. If Marcus Kane did this, then why haven't you taken him down? Adrian's lips curved into a knowing smile. That, Miss Carter, is where you come in. Lena's breath hitched at his words. A chill ran down her spine as she stared at Adrian, searching for any sign of deception. But his expression was unreadable. Calm, composed, and entirely in control. She clenched the file in her hands. What do you mean? Adrian leaned forward, his piercing gaze locked onto hers. You spent all this time trying to destroy me. But now that you know the truth, I'm giving you a choice. Lena swallowed, her pulse quickening. A choice? Adrian nodded. You can walk away, pretend none of this ever happened. Go back to your life and leave the past behind. He paused, then added, or you can help me bring Marcus Kane down. The air in the room felt heavier. The name Marcus Kane had always lingered in the shadows of high society, an influential businessman, powerful and ruthless. But Lena had never imagined that he had been the one pulling the strings all along. She shook her head, trying to steady herself. Why would you need my help? You have money, power, everything. A small smirk touched Adrian's lips. You underestimate how deep Kane's connections run. He covers his tracks well, and I can't take him down alone. But you have something he won't see coming. Lena frowned. And what's that? Adrian's eyes darkened slightly. A personal reason to want him destroyed. Lena exhaled sharply, her grip tightening on the file. It was true. Kane had ruined her sister's life, and in doing so, he had turned Lena into a woman consumed by revenge. It had just been aimed at the wrong man. She hesitated. And what happens if I say no? Adrian leaned back, his smirk fading. Then I'll fight him alone. But make no mistake, Lena. Kane doesn't leave loose ends. He already knows you've been digging. If you walk away now, you become a target. A cold shiver ran through her. She had been so focused on Adrian that she hadn't even considered that someone else might have been watching her. If Marcus Kane truly was as dangerous as Adrian claimed, then she had already stepped too far into his world. Lena's mind raced. Just hours ago, she had believed Adrian was her enemy. Now, he was offering her an alliance. Could she trust him? Could she work with the man she had sworn to destroy? Adrian studied her, as if reading her thoughts. Then, in a low voice, he said, You wanted justice for your sister. This is your chance. Lena closed her eyes briefly. Every instinct screamed at her to be careful. But deep down, she knew. There was no turning back now. She took a slow breath, then met Adrian's gaze with unwavering determination. I'm in. A slow smile played at Adrian's lips, as if he had expected her answer all along. Good, he said simply, his voice smooth yet unreadable. Lena, however, felt no sense of victory. The weight of her decision pressed heavily on her chest. Just hours ago, she'd been certain Adrian Black was her enemy. Now, she had willingly stepped into his world, aligning herself with the man she had once sworn to ruin. She squared her shoulders. What's the plan? Adrian stood and walked over to a sleek cabinet near his desk. He unlocked it, pulling out a small stack of files before placing them on the desk. Lena's eyes flicked to them, recognizing the name on the top one. Marcus Kane. Kane isn't just corrupt, Adrian said, flipping the file open. He's dangerous. He launders money, manipulates politicians, and destroys anyone who threatens him. What he did to Anna was just one of many moves in a much larger game. Lena's stomach twisted. Then, why hasn't he been exposed? Adrian's jaw tightened. Because he's careful. He keeps his hands clean while using others to do his dirty work. No evidence ever leads back to him. Lena crossed her arms. So, how do we bring him down? Adrian's lips curved slightly, his gaze sharp. By giving him exactly what he wants. Lena frowned. And what's that? Adrian leaned forward, resting his hands on the desk. Me? Lena blinked in confusion. Adrian continued, his voice measured. Kane has been after my company for years. He's been waiting for the right moment to strike. If I make him believe I'm vulnerable, if I make him think I need his help, he'll take the bait. Lena narrowed her eyes. And where do I come in? Adrian's gaze didn't waver. You'll be the one to sell the lie. Lena's breath caught. You want me to act as your weak spot. Adrian's smirk was slight but knowing. You already are. Lena felt heat rush to her face, though she wasn't sure if it was from anger or something else entirely. I spent weeks trying to ruin you. Why would Kane believe I suddenly switched sides? Adrian held her gaze, his voice lower now, more calculated. Because we're going to give him something he can't resist, an opportunity to use you against me. Lena's pulse quickened. Every instinct told her this was dangerous, but another part of her knew he was right. Kane had no reason to suspect her, and if she played her role correctly, she could get close enough to uncover his secrets. She exhaled slowly. And if this goes wrong? Adrian's smirk faded. Then we both become his next targets. The weight of those words settled between them. This wasn't just a game. It was a war. And Lena had just chosen her side. Lena sat in silence, absorbing the reality of what she had agreed to. This wasn't just about uncovering the truth anymore. It was about stepping directly into the line of fire. Adrian watched her carefully, as if assessing whether she truly understood the risk. His voice was steady when he spoke. You'll need to be convincing. Kane doesn't trust easily, and he never makes a move unless he's certain he holds all the power. Lena met his gaze, her determination solidifying. Then I'll make him believe he does. Adrian nodded, seemingly satisfied with her resolve. He pulled out another file, this one much thinner than the one on Kane. He slid it toward her. This is your new identity, he said. Lena Carter can't just walk into Kane's world. But if he believes you're someone useful, someone desperate enough to betray me, he'll welcome you in. Lena flipped open the file, scanning the new name and backstory he had prepared for her. And how exactly do I convince him I'm betraying you? Adrian's lips curled slightly, but there was no amusement in his eyes. By doing something that makes it look real. Before she could ask what he meant, he walked around the desk, stopping just a foot away from her. The sudden closeness sent a jolt through her, but she didn't step back. His voice lowered. Kane needs to see conflict. He needs to see you turning against me. Lena swallowed, her heart hammering against her ribs. And how do we do that? Adrian studied her for a moment, then, without warning, reached out. His fingers brushed against her wrist, light, deliberate. You came here with one goal, to destroy me. His touch lingered, but his gaze remained sharp. What if Kane thinks you succeeded? Lena's breath hitched. You want me to betray you publicly? Adrian's smirk returned, this time with a dangerous edge. Not just betray me, humiliate me, make it look like you outplayed me. Lena frowned, her mind spinning. That won't be easy. No one would believe I got the upper hand on Adrian Black. Adrian's smirk deepened. Which is exactly why it'll work. Lena hesitated, knowing what he was asking. If they pulled this off, she would have to go against everything she had worked for within his company. She would have to convince the world, Kane, the media, and even Adrian's own people, that she had turned on him completely. Her fingers curled around the file. And when Kane believes it? Adrian's expression darkened. Then we take everything from him. Lena inhaled sharply. There was no turning back now. If she did this, there would be no second chances. She looked up at Adrian, holding his gaze. Tell me what I need to do. Adrian's smirk was gone now. This was no longer a game. It was war. He took a step back, his expression unreadable as he retrieved another folder from his desk. This one was thicker, heavier, filled with details of their next move. You'll need it to make it look convincing, he said, sliding it toward her. A betrayal Kane can't ignore. Lena opened the file and scanned the contents. Her stomach tightened. It was a detailed plan to leak a critical business deal Adrian had been working on for months, one that, if exposed, would make him look weak and vulnerable in the corporate world. She looked up sharply. You want me to sabotage you? Adrian leaned against the desk, his arms crossed. Not completely. Just enough to make Kane believe he has the upper hand. Lena exhaled. And what if this backfires? What if Kane decides to strike before we're ready? Adrian's eyes darkened. That's the risk we take. She studied him carefully. He was calm, as if this was just another negotiation, another calculated move in a game of power. But there was something else beneath the surface, something she couldn't quite read. Lena set the file down. What's my next move? Adrian nodded slightly, as if he approved of her decisiveness. First, you'll plant the information in the right hands. A well-placed leak to the press will spread like wildfire. Kane will see it and come to you. Lena hesitated. And what if he doesn't take the bait? Adrian's smirk returned, sharp and knowing. Oh, he will. He's been waiting for a crack in my empire. And once he believes you've given him one, he'll pull you in closer. Lena pressed her lips together. So I become his informant, his inside source. Adrian nodded. Exactly. You'll play the role of a woman scorned, someone who got close to me, only to be discarded. Kane will believe it, because he already thinks I treat people as disposable. Lena scoffed. And do you? Adrian's smirk faltered, but he didn't answer. Instead, he pushed off the desk and walked toward her. Once you're inside Kane's circle, you'll have access to everything. His deals, his associates, his weaknesses. He stopped inches from her, his voice lowering. But make no mistake, Lena. Kane is ruthless. If he suspects even for a second that you're playing him... Lena held his gaze. Then I'm dead. The air between them was thick with unspoken tension. Adrian studied her, as if waiting for any sign of hesitation. But Lena had already made her choice. She straightened her shoulders. Tell me when to start. Adrian's lips curved slightly, but there was no amusement in his expression. You already have. The weight of his words settled heavily on Lena's shoulders. There was no more room for doubt. She had already stepped into the fire, and now there was no turning back. The next morning, the storm began. Lena sat at her desk, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. The information Adrian had given her was damning. Leaked reports, confidential emails, and details of a crucial business acquisition Adrian had been negotiating. If exposed, it would shake the foundation of his company, making him look reckless, incompetent, vulnerable. Her heart pounded as she typed out an anonymous email to a well-known financial journalist. Every click of the keyboard felt heavier, like she was carving out her own fate. Subject: exclusive tip on Adrian Black's next move. She hesitated for only a second before hitting send. It was done. Now all she could do was wait. The news broke within hours. By the afternoon, headlines flooded the internet. Adrian Black's biggest deal in jeopardy. Insider leaks confidential plans. The office buzzed with chaos. Employees whispered in hushed voices. Executives scrambled for answers. Adrian, however, remained calm. Lena watched him from across the room. He stood in his glass-walled office, arms crossed, as he listened to his team's frantic updates. If she hadn't known the truth, she would have believed he was truly caught off guard. Then, as if sensing her gaze, he turned. For a brief second, their eyes met. Lena's stomach twisted. She couldn't show any sign of guilt, couldn't let anyone suspect that she had been the one to set this fire. Instead, she forced herself to look away and continued playing her part, the loyal employee caught in the middle of a storm. The real test, however, came later that evening. As the sun dipped below the skyline, Lena received a message from an unknown number. Unknown, meet me, midnight, Harbour Club. Her pulse quickened. There was only one person who would reach out like this. Marcus Kane. She gripped her phone, inhaling deeply. It had worked. He had taken the bait. But this was only the beginning. She wasn't just walking into a meeting. She was walking into the lion's den. Midnight arrived faster than Lena expected. The city's skyline gleamed in the distance as she stepped out of her car in front of the Harbour Club, a high-end, members-only establishment where the rich and powerful met behind closed doors. A valet took her keys without question. She walked up the stone steps, her heels clicking against the pavement, her nerves hidden beneath a perfectly composed expression. Inside, the dimly lit atmosphere buzzed with hushed conversations and the clinking of expensive glasses. The scent of aged whiskey and cigar smoke lingered in the air. Wealth and corruption went hand in hand here, and Marcus Kane thrived in places like this. A server approached her. "Miss Carter?" Lena nodded, quickly adjusting to her new alias. "This way," he said, leading her through the lounge toward a private booth in the back. And then she saw him. Marcus Kane. He sat casually, one arm draped over the back of the leather booth, his dark suit tailored to perfection. His piercing gaze swept over her as she approached, a slow smirk forming on his lips. "You're bolder than I expected," he said, his deep voice smooth, calculated. Lena slid into the seat across from him, meeting his stare without hesitation. "I don't waste time," Kane chuckled, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Good. I hate dealing with cowards." He set the glass down, leaning forward slightly. "So, tell me, Lena, why would a woman who worked so closely with Adrian Black suddenly betray him?" This was the moment that would define everything. Lena exhaled slowly, letting just enough bitterness seep into her voice. "Because I learned the truth about him. He's not the man I thought he was." Kane tilted his head. "And what truth is that?" She forced a dry laugh. "That he only looks out for himself. That he uses people, then discards them when they're no longer useful." She let her expression harden. "I was useful to him once. Then I wasn't. So I made sure he felt the same sting of betrayal." Kane studied her, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the table. "Interesting." Lena held her breath, waiting for his reaction. If he didn't believe her, she was as good as dead. Then, slowly, he grinned. "I like you," he said, amusement flickering in his eyes. "You're smart, and, more importantly, you're dangerous." Lena relaxed, just slightly. Kane reached into his pocket and slid a small card across the table. "This is a test," he said. "You want to prove yourself? You want to show me you're really done with Adrian Black?" Lena picked up the card, scanning the address printed on it. "Be there tomorrow night," Kane continued. "If you're serious, we'll talk business. If not..." His smile remained, but his tone darkened. "Then, I'll know exactly where your loyalties lie." Lena nodded, slipping the card into her purse. "I'll be there." Kane leaned back, satisfied. "Then, we have a deal." Lena forced a smirk, lifting her glass in a mock toast before taking a slow sip. But inside, her mind raced. Tomorrow night, she would be walking into a situation she knew nothing about. And one wrong move could cost her everything.